Hi, Diane. Do you guys hear feedback? Okay, good. Thank you.
Oh.
So we're trying something new tonight, ladies. We have our own Zoom account now, and we're going to record it and move it to YouTube so that we never lose the recordings. That's our goal. So that we don't have 30 days for everybody who can't join live. All right. How's the feedback now? Better? Okay, excellent. You're so evil. Now I'm tempted. Hold that.
Recording in progress.
Hi.
Hi, Laura.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I think we're just a couple minutes early, so thanks for hopping on early. I was just like to make sure that we don't have any technical difficulties.
I always do, so.
I was just saying we have a new Zoom account that we're using tonight, and we are going to be now uploading our chats for those that can't watch live to YouTube. So hopefully all goes well. Fingers crossed.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, coming along with the technology.
I love that there's a Peloton Moms book club, by the way. That's just so fun. I have a Peloton treadmill. It's kept me sane during, quarantine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, I started it in 2018 and kind of on a whim. I was a member of. I know, I'm holding it. If you're not on mute, can you mute? I'm trying to see who that is. I think it's 14048.
That's me. Do you need me to mute?
Yes, please. Thanks. Oops, I lost Laura. Laura, are you there?
Me?
Yep.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Perfect. Okay, I thought I lost you. Okay, it's almost 8 o'clock, so we'll get started shortly. So people should be able to continue to join, but without any chirping, so it shouldn't interrupt us in our conversations. And I think everybody should be muted, but if you're not, please mute, other than Laura, of course. So we like to be prompt. So good evening, ladies. Tonight we are so excited to be speaking with Laura Dave regarding her most recent novel, The Last Thing He Told Me. a few quick thank yous before we start. First off, thank you to Laura for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with the Peloton Moms Book Club. Thanks as always to Jennifer Crowley and Lindsay Gerbaki for their help behind the scenes. And last but not least, thanks to all the moms who've already read the novel, recommended it to their friends, expressed their love for it in the group, and are here this evening to chat with us. And then special thanks to the moms who join us later to catch the chat that's recorded. So thanks for taking the time to come back and join us. So let's get started. Laura, how about giving us a quick synopsis of The Last Thing He Told Me and sharing your inspiration for the book? We try to avoid spoilers if at all possible, in case, you know, there are some that haven't quite finished the book yet. But at the same time, we certainly want to be able to talk about the themes of the book.
Great. Well, I'll be careful to avoid them, and spoiler alert. So if you want to
Thank you.
Real quick. First of all, thank you all for having me. We were just chatting right before, Jen and I were just chatting right before we started. And I was saying that my Peloton treadmill has kept me sane during COVID, having it at home. So this is particularly fun. So my book, The Last Thing He Told Me, really is about a woman named Hannah Hall, who is newly married and has relocated to Sausalito, California to live with her new husband and his 16-year-old daughter, who is very uninterested in having a relationship with her. Despite the fact that they are, you know, less than simpatico at the beginning of their story together, Hannah's very happy in this new life until the day that her husband's firm is embroiled in a financial scandal and he does not return home, leaving in his wake only a short note that says protect her, and leaving Hannah with this 16-year-old girl, Bailey, to try to pick up the pieces and figure out where Owen is now and why he is gone. So that's sort of the brief synopsis. This book sort of came to be a long time ago. I started working on it in 2012. I've always been very interested in the Enron scandal, sort of where the humanity.
Okay. Can we just pause? Let's just pause for 1 second. Somebody's not muted. I'm trying to see if I can figure it out. It looks like it's, there's a few of you guys that aren't muted. Can you mute, please? Thank you. Thank you so much. So sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, Laura.
Not at all. Not at all. I actually love the sound of kids. I have a little 5-year-old in the next room. So at any moment you might hear him and I'm going to have to mute as well. So, no apology necessary. But I was saying, so Linda Lay, Kenneth Lay's wife, was particularly interesting to me because I saw an interview in which she said, my husband's done nothing wrong. And I always marinated on that and started to imagine Hannah, a woman who was in a situation where who she believed her husband to be, and there will be no spoilers here, but who she believed her husband to be was in direct paradox to who the world thought he was. And I wanted to play with that, but it took me a long time to figure out what the story was that I was actually telling, because I wanted to do two things while I was doing that. The first and most important thing was, there's a Gloria Steinem quote that says, it is very important for women to watch other women become the heroes of their own lives. And I always wanted Hannah to become the hero of her life. I didn't want her to be a victim of this scandal and what was going on. So that was one thing I was trying to stay true to. And the other thing was, I had my son in the middle of working on the book, and I realized that this was the primal story of a woman becoming a mother. And I really wanted to honor that journey as well. This, I will not say what the end is, but there's a lot of interest in the end, and some people have love reactions to it, and some people have very sad reactions to it. There's a whole bunch of reactions. And again, I will not ruin anything, but I will just open also by saying there is going to be a sequel. And so a lot of those questions or feelings might be resolved in the next chapter. But this felt to me like the most honest place to end this chapter. And I'm not going to say anything else about that. And also, my husband and I are in the middle of turning this into a television show for Apple. And a lot of the questions that you might have also hopefully will be answered. So I only open by saying that because I would say I feel so blessed that I get, 8 out of 10 notes that I get from readers are all about all sorts of things, but I would say 2 out of 10 are definitely reactions to the end. So I always open by talking about the end.
Oh, all right, hang on 1 second again. We're having problems with muting. Let me see here. Monique, can you mute? Thank you.
Look at that.
I think it's Monique. All right. Sorry about that.
Oh, no.
Okay. So that was kind of be my next question. When did you write the novel? So it sounds like you started quite some time ago, and I was wondering if it all came to completion during the pandemic and how that maybe would have impacted your writing.
That's a great question. I actually went to Austin in January 2020. So shortly before this, to do my final research trip. Research is always a huge part of how I work on a book. I spend a lot of time trying to walk around in characters' shoes. So here that meant studying attorney. For the legal issues that come up in the book, I spoke with 2 attorneys, one of whom prosecuted more organized crime cases than anyone else in history. So I looked at it that way. And then I actually do trips where I walk the exact walk that the characters in the book do, and sort of have the experience they have, pancakes at midnight, that sort of thing. My last trip to Austin was in January, so shortly before the world shut down. And being the hypochondriac that I am, I was already nervous and the only person on the airplane with a mask. It was at that point where like all of a sudden like Purell was like starting to be hard to find. But so I actually turned this book in March, shortly before the pandemic started, which probably was a great thing because I was home alone with my young son during the pandemic. So the pandemic actually didn't have a huge influence on the story, except that it made me think even more sort of intimately about family and the way that plays into our journeys, and what it means to find your home, which is really a question here in the book.
Yeah. So did you start on the sequel during the pandemic, or kind of just took the pandemic off to focus on family and survival?
I actually my husband and I wrote the entire show during the pandemic. So
oh, wow. Okay.
We had the first season of the show. So we had a small writer's room that met on Zoom, and we worked on all 7 episodes, and they're complete, that we're going to go into production in January. So there was a lot of me writing. I like to write in the morning. I write my books in the morning as well as if I'm working on something else. So I would sort of take a pass at things from like 5 to 10, and he would be on our son. And then at night it would switch, and he would work, from 5 p.m. on.
Brandon wants you to set his alarm for 10 minutes earlier tomorrow, so he has time to use the bathroom.
Gwendolyn, I think that's you. Can you mute?
No, he just tried to go and he couldn't.
Hang on. Let's see who that is. Who is that? I think we're good now. So cute. That was a cute conversation.
Whoever's child that is, I just want to squish them. So
I know, so cute.
I was looking at photos of my son. He just turned 5, and the Apple phone or whatever shows you. Okay, it will be like this time 4 years ago or whatever, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, why didn't I just sit home? It goes so fast. So anyway, that was quite cute.
So fast. I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. It flies. It's crazy. Looking at colleges, it's where did the time go?
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Well, we will I have questions about the TV show, but I'm going to get back on track to the
Sure.
book, and then we'll circle back on TV because
But-
that's super
but-
exciting.
To answer your question, so no, I did not. I worked on the sequel
Okay.
a little bit, but not a lot. I'm actually writing another book in between this and the sequel because I know what's happening in the sequel, but I need a little bit more time to sort of marinate it and have a little bit of distance. And I started working on this other book, so which is also a domestic suspense book. So that will be coming first.
Oh, wow. It's amazing how you all juggle everything, which is actually kind of a perfect segue into my next question. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? Do you plot it all out ahead of time? Do you write in a linear fashion? Do you always know where you're trying to end up, or does that just come out as you're writing?
Well, that's a great question. There's an E.L. Doctorow quote that sort of sits on my desk, which is that writing a novel is like driving at night. You can see as far out as your headlights, but you can't see beyond that, and you don't.
What's your question?
And I always think about that
Yes.
because I never outline. I only kind of know what's happening. Like when I started this book, I had a question that I wanted to explore, which is, can we ever know the people we love the most? And I start with that question. And the only thing I knew going into this book was that Hannah was about to have a very complicated day and that this young woman was going to show up at her door with the note that said, protect her. That's all I knew going in. And so for me, writing is really the process of rewriting. There's a great book Stephen King has that I always recommend to people who want to start writing called On Writing, and an Anne Lamott book called Bird by Bird. And those also sort of live on my desk. And both of them really talk about that the first draft is for you and the following drafts are for other people. And that's really how I write. I write the first draft to discover the story. And then in subsequent drafts, I move deeper into character, plotting, things of that nature. So particularly with a suspense book like this, writing was really a lot of rewriting. And I think the final draft ended up having very little to do with what the first draft was when I began.
I have to put her up. Come on.
Monique, can you mute? Monique. So weird. All right, sorry about that, Laura. Okay. So as it relates to, you mentioned that you took a trip to Austin, but Sausalito and Austin were both such vivid settings in the novel. How did you select the two cities? Do you have any ties to either? And, obviously you must have spent some significant time in Sausalito because it was so descriptive in terms of, the houseboat and, you truly, as you're reading, felt like you were there. And I've been to Sausalito and it's so beautiful and you depicted it perfectly.
Well, thank you. I love writing about towns that are on the end of the world in some way, because I think it requires something different of its inhabitants. And I love what that does to character. I love how the characters play with the people in their orbit based on the fact that you are both anonymous in a small town and the exact opposite of anonymous. And particularly with these characters who have a lot of secrets, I thought that was sort of an interesting place to put them. And when I realized where I want a book to be, I'd always been interested in the floating home community in Sausalito. I just start spending a lot of time there. It's really lovely, especially in, I have a book called 800 Grapes, which takes place in West Sonoma County. And people love talking to novelists, or at least that's been my experience. And I go up there and I get to know people who have lived there their whole life, and I do some interviews, and sort of that's early on in the process. I really want to feel like I can speak to inhabiting a place if I'm going to write about it. Austin came to me in a different way for this book, which was that when I got to a plot turn and I realized a college was going to need to be involved, it was about finding a college town. that was interesting to me. And actually I had been to Austin years before, and it always struck me, the vibrancy, the music, the food, the loveliness of the people. People seem so happy there. It's this crazy thing, and everyone's so friendly. And I always thought it would be an interesting place to put a book, especially because there's so many pockets there that make it such a dynamic town. And yet it still feels kind of like a small town, even though it is this vibrant city. And I wanted to take a look at that too. So when I realized a college town was going to be involved, Austin was a natural fit for that. And that's how I got to the other locale of the book.
One of the moms wanted to know, they attended Rice and to Rice because it's such a small school. Did
Oh, I think either you froze or I froze. I didn't hear that question. Uh-oh. Can anyone else hear me? Is it me or is it Jen?
I can hear you. I can't hear her.
I can hear you.
I can hear you. I
Okay.
can't hear Jen.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. I just heard someone say, I can hear you. I can't hear Jen.
All right, Jen's talking. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Okay, perfect.
Okay, good. Sorry. Gosh, I'll have to investigate what's going on with Zoom. Okay, what I was wondering is one of our moms is an owl from Rice University, and she just wanted to ask about, it's such a small school that you referenced, and any particular reason why.
Well, I just love I had heard the story there from a local about this building being shaped like an owl, that an architect went and made it look. And I'm like, that is amazing. That was sort of the lore that you get if you spend enough time in a place. And I love that specificity of that. I had been to Rice once a long time ago. But it was really that story that made me want to, put that in the book and play with that story.
Well, she says thank you for including it, because
Oh, great. I'm so happy.
She feels that was so special. So I feel like, the premise of the book is basically deception.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the role it played? And again, without giving away too much, do you think that Owen was just doing what he felt was his only option?
So that's a great question. And it is a little hard to talk about without ruining anything. But what I will say is when I sat down to answer that question of, can we ever know the people we love? Surprisingly for me, the answer is yes. And what I mean by that is I knew the answer was yes for me. I love this idea that I think about all the time, and I talk about with my husband too, that real love, in some ways, you can equate it to being the witness to someone's life, that you show up and remind them who they've been throughout different moments of their life to help them stay true to themselves, even as that self evolves. I really am enamored of that idea. And with Hannah, what I really wanted to do here was play with the idea of what is it to know someone, because so many of the details of who Owen told her he was shift. I'll just say that. But I like the idea that beneath sort of the biography we share with everyone about ourselves, there's something more permanent, that if we're paying attention to that person, stays true, and that she still knew the truth of him. And he, in that way, wasn't deceiving her. And in that way, their love story gets to stay a love story.
Yes, I love that answer. Because I felt, I don't know, I ultimately felt that he had no choice, and he was acting to try and save Bailey, and didn't have a lot of choices. So I think I'm glad to hear that you think ultimately he was he was good.
Yes.
So let's talk about the relationship between Bailey and Hannah, because obviously it involves significantly start to finish. As a mother of a 15-year-old, I can totally relate to the challenges that Hannah was facing, particularly, you know, kind of in the middle and of the story, you know, in terms of getting her to communicate and open up. And, you know, it felt to me like the importance of truth seemed to be Hannah's motivation and her way of protecting Bailey. You know, that Hannah made the choice to seek the truth. And ultimately, you know, that would be kind of what would, you know, not save Bailey, but, you know, keep Bailey on a path moving forward, if you will, in a, you know, in a really obviously challenging situation with her father not in the picture. So do you think, you know, obviously you wrote it, but do you feel that that was the right choice that Hannah made? You know, or did you consider a different path? Or did you always, was that kind of the core of your book, that she was going to go seek out and try and solve the mystery, if you will?
I think I even from early on, I wanted her to be on her toes, sort of, as opposed to on her heels. And I wanted her to make complicated, messy choices, but trying to do the right thing. And I also think it's particularly hard, you know, she walks into this situation or she finds herself in this situation, and it's not her daughter in the sense of, you know, biologically, it's not her daughter. Right. And she's a new stepmom on top of it. So she's in a very precarious situation with her. And the way that Hannah has always organized her life was to depend on herself. And I think all she knew how to do here was show Bailey that Bailey could depend on her. And the way that operated for her was to not sugarcoat things. And also, you know, she's as calm. I'll say it this way. I have 3 godchildren who I love very much. And I always aim to be as calm, and they're teens. And so, you know, I aim to be a calm presence in their life. And I think Hannah achieves that. She doesn't get thrown when Bailey's coming at her, however she's coming at her. She knows that's about Bailey and less about her. And I think that's one of the ways that then they are able to move toward each other. Because what I've seen depicted so often in books and in movies is that when you have a stepmother stepdaughter relationship, there's often competitiveness that's presented. They're competing for the father's love, father/husband's love, or they're competing for their place in the house. And I really didn't want to do that. I wanted both of them to be certain of Owen's love for each of them, which is why he wrote them such specific notes. I mean, Hannah's note wasn't specific, but it was exactly the direction she needed to be given. Bailey's note was specific in a different way. He loved them. They never questioned that. And so it created for me a more interesting dynamic that we got to explore with them, because they weren't in competition. They were rather strangers in a way, getting to know and love each other.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think removing him in a way almost eliminated any of the competition as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It kind of equaled the playing field, if you will.
I think it's, you know, in an early draft, Owen had a whole third of the book. So you had a whole section of him seeing where he was and what was happening. And a lot of those questions don't get answered because it was their story. But a lot of those questions will get answered in the sequel. That whole Owen answer will come. But I really wanted this to be their story, Hannah's story first, and then Bailey's story also.
Awesome. Okay. Well, now we're really, I'm chomping at the bit for the sequel. So get ready. So the title of the novel for me plays such a pivotal role. You know, sometimes there's a title of a book and you kind of wonder, did they just kind of throw that in at the last minute, or whether it's like brainstorming about what to name a book? But this one, you know, for me it's pivotal. Did you kind of know the title early on, or did it come up, you know, when you finished writing the book? And then also please talk about, you titled each chapter, which is kind of unique and different. And what roles did you feel those titles played in the whole kind of process of the book?
Well, to answer the first part first, when I finally figured out what the ending of the book was, and I wrote that, the epilogue, we'll call it, in like an afternoon, and I really didn't move from it. I mean, a few words, but when I finally figured it out, this was maybe 2018, I felt such a relief that I felt like I knew where the story was finally ending. And that same day, I think I realized what the title was, because what happens I won't spoil anything, but what happens in that moment and what is said, it just felt to me like the whole story in a nutshell. It felt like the most truthful title. And in terms of titling the chapters, I love reading that way. I love when books have, I always say that I was a reader first before I was a writer. I am a voracious reader. I read 3 books a week, and I'm not exaggerating. It's my joy. Wow. Sometimes more. During COVID, sometimes 5 at night. I read every night. I'm like that silly meme you see on Instagram that's like, I'm just going to go to sleep. No, I'm not. I'll go to sleep after this chapter. But in any event, I love reading. I loved creating chapters that with titles, because for a lot of people, they can read kind of in short increments, and then they have to put a book down. My goal as a writer, my first goal, because I'm so grateful to readers for picking up the book and choosing to spend their time this way, is that it is a book that they don't want to put down, but assuming that they have to, because everyone has lives and things that they have to do. I like the idea that each chapter, in addition to telling us the story of the novel, is a little story within it of itself. And you can stop there and almost feel like it was complete onto itself. And the other reason I titled the chapters is I had a teacher in graduate school who talked about how his favorite books were like love letters to one person. And I always think about that. And each time I sit down and write a book, and I think it's one of the things that sort of keeps my writing process pure and mine, is I think about each book being a love letter to one person. My 800 Grapes, which I mentioned, was a love letter to my husband. And this book was really a love letter to my son. And when I think about it that way, some of the chapters are almost references to children's books. If you look at them, No Good, Very Bad Day, other things, which are sort of work on both levels, but play to that idea of this being a love letter to him.
I love that. Now I'm going to go back and read the titles again. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Does he know that? And have you explained that to your son?
I have. He knows, but I've read to him just his acknowledgement at the back, which, you know, most children's books don't have that many words. So I think he thinks that's the whole book, is just the acknowledgement to him. So when he's older and he can read it, he'll see that that's not exactly the case.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so special. So let's talk a little bit about, I think you're, of all of our authors this year, I think you're our first author that was a Reese book selection. We had Furia, which was a young adult selection by Reese, but I think you're our first author this year, that's a Reese selection. So can you talk a little bit about that whole process? When are you notified that you've been chosen? What's the process like? I'm sure you have to keep it, zipper secret for quite some time. And also it has to have changed your career, as an author, kind of significantly, I would think. So, just chat a little bit about that, and then we'll segue into the next part, the TV part.
Well, this was, it sort of happened. I don't know when I can only speak to when they told me, which was early on. I think people get told at different times and the books get chosen at different times, but and it's funny because people have asked me this and I can't remember exactly when, but it was last fall that they told me, and the book came out in May. And simultaneous to that going on was
Hello, Sunshine.
Hello Sunshine was also told me that they were going to adapt it as a TV show. So both things sort of happened at around the same time, and so it's sort of a real pinch me sort of moment. It's crazy, and I think that I feel so grateful for it. I'm sorry, can you guys hear my son? Should I ask them to keep it down? Can you hear him? Let me just mute it for 1 second. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, sorry.
No worries. It's all good.
You hear that? Welcome to 5. So it was, it was sort of unbelievable. And the first call I got was from Lauren Levy-Neustatter, who's the head of Hello Sunshine's film and television. She's the president of that part of the company. And she and Reese Witherspoon call you together, which is just this, it was a Zoom, last May. It's sort of, you're just sort of beside yourself that, I remember thinking that both of them had read it just alone, just made me feel so grateful. So, and then I still can't quite believe it, because every time someone asks, I can't quite believe it. So it definitely does change your career. I think it gives you a whole audience that you might not have had otherwise. And, I just also think it's so great that their mission is, picking women authors who are telling women's stories. It's so important, and it's just so nice to be a part of that community now. And I still can't believe it, is the long and short answer.
Yeah, well, it's so exciting. And so congratulations. As a group of women, we love watching, other women lift fellow women up. And, I'm sure that you will find a way to support fellow women somehow and pass it on. So you've mentioned a little bit about the TV and via Apple Plus, and Hello Sunshine is producing, and you're obviously actively involved in writing the screenplay, it sounds like, with your husband, which is super exciting. And that answers one of the questions that I had, how involved you would be. So it sounds like you're very involved. And it sounds like you've just completed the 7 episodes and production starting soon.
It's supposed to start in January. So we'll see. Knock on wood. It's supposed to start in January.
Okay, so the word on the street is that Hannah is cast. Is that true? That's Julia, or?
So I am, there is some casting stuff going on, which I actually am not allowed to talk about.
Okay.
But I'm hoping there's going to be an announcement about all of that great stuff soon.
Okay. Well, there's some buzz that it might be a pretty woman.
Yeah.
Wink, wink, nod.
Also, the other thing about this all is, people sometimes ask me, like, who did you imagine when you were working on the book? And you don't really think of, they become such real characters to me that I don't think about it like that. And all of it just feels sort of, it all feels unbelievable. It all feels sort of unbelievable. So,
yeah. Are you involved with the casting though? Do you have some say?
Nah, a little, but like, I think we're involved, but a lot of that happens, it's above my pay grade.
Got it. So fun. All right. So this is a follow-up question. Somebody wants to know too, if you could repeat those 2 books that you recommended for people that are wanting to become writers. But we ask this question a lot because we do have a lot of aspiring writers in our group. So a little bit more about any advice you might have, or just tips of like when to write or how to write or just how to get going.
Yeah. Well, I love this question because especially when I was starting out, it mattered so much to me to sort of hear how other writers were doing it. But in addition to that, it still matters because we all have moments where the writing is hard. We all have moments where we want to give up on a book where we don't know what we should be paying attention to and how. And for me, it always comes down to, it sounds like simple advice, but it was the best advice I ever got, which is that writers write. And you can sort of let go of the rest if you are staying true to your own process of writing. For some people, that means writing 2 days a week. Some days, people, that means you're writing 7 days a week. For some people, that's 2 hours a day. But what I encourage people to do is find a writing habit that works for you. And just like you don't question that you're going to brush your teeth every day, you don't question that you're going to stick to that writing habit, because that's your best chance of getting things done. And the 2 books that I mentioned were On Writing by Stephen King and Bird by Anne Lamott, which I read and reread when I sort of need that lift. And also, when I started writing, I was in graduate school for writing, and I finished most of my first novel, and I published a couple of stories in literary magazines. So I was feeling, quite proud of myself. I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. I come home to New York, I spill water on my computer, and I lose the whole book. So you learn very early on that the writing life, I know, the writing life, lots of twists and turns. But I remember talking to my father, and he was like, well, what are you going to do now? And I'm like, well, I'm going to start again. What else am I going to learn to back up, people, apparently.
Yeah.
You just find the time. And when I had to learn to start again, I didn't have the cushion of graduate school anymore. So I had about 13 jobs, and literally 13. I was tutoring private school kids. I was writing for ESPN. I was writing for Glamour magazine. I was working at a PR agency, anything and everything. I had small jobs, but I knew by then that my writing habit was that I need to write in the mornings from 5 or 6 in the morning till 10 in the morning, at least, until, and hopefully when I had time longer, but I protected that writing time. So that's why for some people, the writing time might be 2 hours a day. It might be 2 hours a week, but protect that time as yours, and you're going to get somewhere better. And the other thing I always say is that it's really great idea to try to finish what you start. And what I mean by that is sometimes you end up putting a book down. I often write books that take place in Big Sur, and all of them end up on the cutting room floor because apparently I haven't found the right book that I want to write in Big Sur. But it always gets you in ways you're not expecting to something else. There's an expression in The Last Thing He Told Me called the Could Have Been Boys. And there was a whole book around that expression that most things from that book did not last, but the Could Have Been Boys did. Think you draw from what you have and from what you've created. And so that's the other thing I really talk about. The flip side of that is I always tell people, don't be worried about throwing things out. They come back. Everything can come back in a variety of ways. So I know that that's a long-winded answer, but I think that the biggest thing about writing is to sort of embrace the process. I know a lot of writers who don't like writing. They joke they like having written. I love writing. I don't like exercising. I like having exercised, but I actually love writing. And the more you can enjoy your process, if that means you treat yourself to a really yummy latte while you're working, or that's the time that you listen to music, or that's the time as moms that you close the door and no one's allowed in, cherish that space and you're going to want to return to it.
That's awesome. Awesome advice. Just curious, that you lost your first novel. Did you try to recreate that? Or did you just kind of move on and start a new true first novel?
I had printed out the prologue of that novel, which became the prologue of my first book. Everything else, the entire story changed
Wow.
after that. So it was really, and in that novel was a story of someone losing something they created. So, you know, I hope that it ended up as a better book, but I also taught me a lesson too, that you're gonna lose a lot of things that you work on. Maybe you won't be as silly as me and not back it up, but you might lose it another way, or
Right.
first time you write something, an agent might not respond, but your only job as a writer is to keep writing, and eventually you're going to get to where you need to go. It really taught me how much I wanted it, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because I'm sure some people would be like, "Oh my God, that's it. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm walking away," you know.
Exactly. My mom was like, maybe now it's time for law school. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So you mentioned that there's a suspense novel in the works for the sequel. Is there anything you can share about that and the timeline for that release?
Well, that is moving along, and it again is sort of it's a messy family mystery where two of the family members together are trying to figure out a secret about their family that no one knew until now.
Okay.
That's
Sounds
a little
fantastic.
deep, but it's early. And I will say this, it starts on a cliff in Santa Barbara.
Oh,
So it's a lot of fun doing that research. Every week I'm like, I need to go to Santa Barbara. I'll see you guys.
yeah. Wine country. What's the timeline? Will we see that in 2022 or 2023 or?
Probably 2023. My goal, I usually take this, the last thing he told me took me a long time, but it usually takes me about, I'm aiming to have this done in 2022, and then it will be released in 2023. That's
Okay.
so.
All right. Fingers crossed. Okay, so we're gonna do things a little bit differently because people are begging to talk about the ending. So
Okay.
before we do that, so normally we would wrap, this would be our last question, but we're gonna do this question, then we're gonna circle back and I'm gonna announce that spoilers are coming, and if you want to hang up, hang up. And we'll go back and talk about the ending for 1 second. So tell us what you're currently reading. You've already mentioned you're a voracious reader, or tell us, 5 books that you've recently read that we must read in the Peloton Moms group.
Okay. I love this question. Okay. So let me start with, I loved, so over quarantine, I read and reread some of my favorites. So I'm going to start with some of my favorites, which was, one is Heartburn by Nora Ephron. That lives on my bedside and is one of my favorite books. I love The Idea of You by Robin Lee.
We chatted with Robin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Earlier this year. Yeah.
I love her.
Yes.
I love Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love The Lost Legends of New Jersey by Frederick Rankin.
Okay.
That's one of my favorites. I love that book. I read and reread that. I'm like looking, if I flip this around and you saw my desk, everyone would be terrified. So I'm not going to do that. But I read Empire of Pain, which is a nonfiction book about the Sackler family and the Oxy crisis. I found that fascinating. I always say I have a day book and a night book. So the day book is something that I sort of have to focus on more. Like when I'm done with my work, my reward is my day book. And then my night book is something that's more purely escapist. Gotta get there. And a book that I loved also that I read over quarantine was The Last Flight, Julie Clark. So those are some. I have many more, but those are some that I mean. Can I give 2 more?
Of course.
I love Everything Changes by Jonathan Tropper. I love everything by Tropper. And then I love, what else did I read recently that I really loved? Searching for Sylvie Lee. I loved. That was another one. So I'm just looking up. I want to make sure I say the author's name correctly. Jean Kwok.
Okay. Awesome. So we will share all of those suggestions on both Instagram and Facebook, and we'll tag you with your suggestions. But a quick question that I actually had, what would you recommend for those that just discovered you as an author with The Last Thing He Told Me, like to go back to some of your previous works? What would you recommend is, the next book to grab from your repertoire?
I would recommend 800 Grapes.
Okay.
Different. It's more of a family drama, but there's definitely some secrets in there. And I care a lot about that book because I also care a lot about West Sonoma County where it takes place. So that would be the next one I would tell people to get. They actually just released it and it's not on my desk, but with a pretty new cover that looks a little Last Thing He Told Me. So.
Oh, awesome. So fun. Maybe we'll, is it published by your current publisher?
Yes, by Simon & Schuster. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Maybe we'll ask them if they'll let us do a fun little giveaway with that.
I bet they will. I bet they'd be happy to.
I'm sure they've been so generous. Okay, so now we're going to do things a little bit differently. Somebody says 800 Grapes is great on audio as well. So spoilers are coming. So if you don't want to hear the end, time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, now, quick spoiler. Let's talk about the ending. Can we just for a second?
Absolutely.
So, could have gone lots of different ways. Yeah. How did you decide to end the way you did?
So in many of the earlier iterations of the book, the last scene was Owen returning to his family in different capacities. He was at the airport meeting them. Nicholas was able to organize that. Hannah was able to figure out his return. And the more I learned from the lawyer that I spoke with and other research I was doing, the more two things happened simultaneously. The more I learned how difficult, if not impossible, it would be for that to happen and for them to stay in their life. And also, I figured out that this was the primal story of Hannah becoming Bailey's mother for all intents and purposes. And I wanted to honor that journey for this part of the storytelling. It wasn't like I then realized, I'm going to write a sequel, so I could switch it. I actually didn't even know that I was going to write a sequel until after I turned in the book, and the sequel came to me in the middle of the night. And I was like, oh, this is when Owen gets his moment, and this is the story. And I called my editor and I said, I think I have another book here about this family. But so when I realized that he couldn't return home in a traditional sense, I was left with two choices. One was that they would all be going into witness protection in some way, or Hannah and Bailey would stay in their life. And that was when it felt to me that to be fair to Owen and how they knew Owen in a way that, the rest of the world didn't, that paradox we were talking about at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Owen wouldn't want that because he wouldn't be able to necessarily return, and Bailey would be at risk. So there were actual reasons, but the largest reasons had to do with the emotional journey of Hannah and Bailey. I wanted to wrap around that story. I wanted to wrap around, I wanted to end with Mom and tell the rest of the story, when I realized what the rest of the story was at a later point. But to me, that felt like the most truthful end. And as I said, I get notes and people love it. And I get notes and people are like, what have you done? As though I their house and hurt someone there. So and I get it. But I hope that means that, people really care about the characters and that they want what they want for them. And I feel relief that I can say, this isn't the end. This isn't the end. There's going to be relief for them. But for this journey, we start with a woman who does not have her own mother, trying to become a mother to someone that wasn't her daughter from birth. And I like that the end is them really finding their way to each other.
Yeah. Someone just wrote, it's heartbreaking, but it seemed to be the only way to keep them safe. So, and I think, chatting with you and understanding that, the thought process that it really couldn't happen, and you were trying to, stay true to what is real. And, you know, also knowing that there is another story coming, I think that wraps it up and maybe makes it a little bit less polarizing.
It is, it's so funny because now like I truly, whenever I'm chatting with people now, I open by being like, it's not the end. And I relief or, you know, you know, so that is, it's not, hopefully not quite as polarizing in that way, but I do feel like this was the most honest ending.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for your patience with a little snafus with the noises. But that's what we are. We're mamas first and foremost. So,
Honestly, really, I mean, Jacob has been on so many of my Zooms. It's just a pleasure to hear everyone's a tidbit of everyone's life. So please, no apology necessary.
Yeah, that's life, right? Yeah. So, but this was absolutely delightful, and hopefully, it sounds like maybe we can get you back in 2023. And in the meantime, we will be cheering for you and anxious to see what happens with the television show. And we'll all get reading 800 Grapes and share all your recommendations. So thank you so much, and have a great night.
Oh, you know what else I really quickly before we get off, which is to do, I know they're going to probably do the 800 Grapes giveaway, but I also have some, the last thing he told me mugs, which you can include that in the giveaway as well. So
okay, awesome.
I started to get up and get one, but I'm like, I don't need to do that. That'll be part of the giveaway. We'll give it to you. You can have some of those mugs if you'd like them.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, I love that. That'd be so fun. Do I just coordinate that with, I'm trying to think who's taking over for
Julia's
Maggie.
taking over for Maggie. So
yeah.
I'll shoot her an email when we get off tonight and let them know that we'll do that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Loved that.